forget about whether this would work exactly. There's a larger point here. The larger point is, I think that the future is building inexpensive places to live in which you've designed the entire town. This is almost never done. I spend a great deal of time in my garage trying to invent things that are totally impractical. And I want to run through something just for fun to make you think about something that maybe you can improve on. And here are two known technologies that I've melded together. So for example, one way, if you look at this as the left side and the right side, these are different technologies. On the left, we've got a lake that pumps water up to a mountain reservoir, and then when you need electricity, you let that water flow back down through a generator and back into the lake. Now, of course, that alone would not be a good system, because the energy it would take to pump it uphill would almost certainly be more than the energy that you could create pumping it down. So this would work if you have some other source that is not dependable at night, and the only thing you're trying to do is get a little night electricity. But how do you get that? Well, there's another technology called a heat chimney, and it has to do with the fact that heat wants to rise. So if you had, for example, let's say this is a mountain. So on the left of the mountain, you've got this reservoir and this system of storing water that you can later release to create energy through a generator. But on the other side, you've got air. So you're heating the air, and it doesn't have to be a hothouse, but I drew it that way. Imagine there's like a mile-long hothouse. The sun is going through the glass and into the stone surface, heating it up. That hot air has to go somewhere, so it goes up this long tube, turns a generator, similar to how a windmill would work, but a generator. And then the air goes out into the atmosphere. Now, the second thing that this can do, and it's been, and by the way, I'm not inventing this. These are existing things. I'm just sort of putting them together. One of the things you could do is use this hot air system to scrub the air, to remove pollution. I think you can remove CO2. I'm not sure about that. But you can at least scrub the pollution out, because forcing things through a filter is sort of the way you do it, or at least one way to do it. So if you could create a system that would have hot air going up, that would operate most of the day and night. So you could actually get that to work through most of the night, because there's always a differential between the valley and the top of the hill. So as long as there's a differential, you've got an airflow. So one of these will work all night, and that can create enough electricity maybe to help pump some water up if you've got some extra, and then the two of these can feed a town. Now, forget about whether this would work exactly. There's a larger point here. The larger point is, I think that the future is building inexpensive places to live in which you've designed the entire town. This is almost never done. Design is usually limited to the specific, let's say, industry. So for example, a builder and an architect might design a house, and they might maybe design a little neighborhood, but they're not designing the whole town. Towns sort of get built up over time most of the time, so it's, you just do what you can given the constraints. But if you started from scratch to build the most efficient, well-designed city that was the perfect place to live, everybody would want to be there. You don't even need a car, you've got free electricity, or it's close to it. So, and you've got good weather. So if you were going to locate this new town that will be the future town that's well-designed, so it's really inexpensive but great, both of those things. Yeah, and somebody's saying in the comments, nuclear. You could do something similar simply by having nuclear power, let's say generation 4. So in all these cases, you're deciding on your location, you're making sure you've got the right kind of weather and temperature for what you're trying to build, and you make sure you have a water source and an energy source. So let's say you can find lots of places that meet this test in the United States where you could build a city. Then how would you do it? I think it needs to be some kind of massive coordinated wiki sort of situation, because there are so many skills involved. That's why it's never been done, I think. I think it would take so many different kinds of engineers to coordinate. It would be hundreds of them. It would just be really hard. But once you got it going, probably each of the modules could be adjusted. For example, some of the engineers might be doing waste treatment. Some of the engineers might be just making sure everybody has Wi-Fi. But those are all little modules. So you could always say, okay, we got a better way to do the Wi-Fi. We got a better way to treat the waste, and you trade those out. But the point is, you could design a city that was super cheap and super good at the same time. Somebody says it sounds horrible. What about this would sound horrible? It's something that literally hasn't been designed yet. All right. So then solar will only be 4 times expensive as current electric generation. Well, I'm not here to argue the pros and cons of the different power sources. I'm just saying that it's fun to think through the ideas of how you could go about that. And I'm pretty sure that if you designed a town really well, it would be better to live in than anything that anybody lives today, and way, way cheaper. And I think that that's the future. It's going to happen. Once you have the design finalized, you don't need the engineers anymore. That is incorrect. Sounds like you have not worked around technology. You never don't need the engineers, because things are continually breaking and needing upgrades and fixes and problem shooting. You might need fewer of them. Well, probably not even that. You always need the engineers. So he says Germany has done that. Well, I'd be interested to know when that happened, because we could do it now way better. What is the value of money in a future that doesn't require it? Well, that's a big question there. You need someone managing the back end. Yeah, you definitely need somebody managing the whole thing. You forgot about power transmission lines. Yeah. Well, you could use power transmission lines, but you'd lose a lot of power. Scott loves campus housing. I love alternative housing. So I'm not trying to put any of you in any kind of special housing. The conservatives who are in my audience are so primed to look for socialism wherever they can find it that you see it even where it isn't. So if I say, hey, you can do anything you want, live anywhere you want, but also some other people might want to choose these kinds of options, that's not exactly socialism. That's everybody can choose anything they want, and if the market wants cheap housing, it will have it. Yeah, there's lots of net zero housing, but I believe that the cost of building that stuff and the fact that they use solar panels and stuff, there are a lot of disadvantages of those. Typically, when you see something like a zero energy house, all of the design was done by the builder. But is that the best way to have electricity? Is the best way that each house generates its own? Maybe. But if you had designed the whole city, maybe you have one place that generates electricity, be it a central site with, let's say, nuclear or something else. All right. Interesting comment. Is the herd management goal large-scale campus life? I don't know what that means. Hemp bale houses are the best, somebody says. I looked into all of those alternative building things when I built my house. Now, this was 10 years ago, but some things haven't changed. And people kept telling me, use these hay bales. Some kind of, different hay bales, and you put them in your walls and you build up the thing. But you start looking into all these alternative technologies, and you find stuff like, yeah, this hay is really good insulation, and it doesn't cost much. It's not really that hard to build, but it'll be filled with rodents. And I think the straw becomes less effective as an insulator over time. I don't know, something happens to it, it degrades, or bugs get in there and eat it. So it turns out that if you actually, if you're trying to build your hippie house, you won't be happy in 5 years. Bugs will eat it, yeah. So there are a lot of these new technologies, and then the other problem is that you would never get code approval. You would never find a builder who knew how to build it. Yeah, they all sound good, but if you try to build anything that's not standard stuff, it doesn't happen. Now here's my other idea. My other idea is that you design a bunch of rooms that are standard designs, but they're the best ones. Because you've seen a million different kitchens, right? But it's not true that they're all just as good. There are some designs for how you design a living room, a bedroom, etc., that are just better. There's no doubt about it. Some room sizes are better. So you come up with, you do a bunch of testing and you come up with the sizes that are the best. You might have a few varieties, 2 or 3 different choices, but they're all standardized. And they're also 1 foot square sizes. So if somebody wanted to build it themselves or keep the construction costs down, every part of the house, you'd never have to cut anything, because the whole town would have access to 1 foot square pieces for the floor, let's say, for the ceiling, let's say, maybe for the walls. And it doesn't have to be just 1 foot squares, but the point is that there's no situation where you'd ever have to cut any material. Everything could be built by taking it and just putting it where it belongs, because all the rooms would be designed to be the exact size of existing things. And that alone would probably lower the cost by 30%, 40%. Somebody says the best room designs become dated pretty quickly. I agree, and that's why you would want to have the option to redesign your home fairly easily once it's been built. And if everything is modular, you could take out your floor and say, hey, I think I want this to be a different kind of room, and put in a different floor without cutting anything. Nothing would ever be cut. How much is Lego paying me? Yeah, I'm being paid by Big Lego. I don't know if modular homes will ever be as... The trouble with modular homes is that they require that the labor happens in the factory. And if the labor turns out to be the expensive part, I think you could find situations where people could build their own homes, maybe not the hard parts. There might be something that they can't do, like framing it or the basement. But for all the walls and floors and stuff, the homeowner could build it themselves. All they need is the pieces. Do you like vertical farming? I don't know that anybody's figured out how to make it economical. I actually have an investment in an indoor farm company that's doing well, actually. Don't build where there is freezing and thawing. Yeah, that would be one of the main concerns, correct? What happened to geothermal? So geothermal is a perfect example of a technology that works better if you design the city. Because if you try to do geothermal for your one house, it just isn't economical. But if you were trying to do geothermal for an apartment complex, or let's say a college campus or a city, you would do it efficiently because you'd have common systems and stuff, and you would do it once before everything got built. So that's why you design it from scratch.